California Democrat Nancy Pelosi is elected as Speaker of the House of Representatives. This as Democrats take command of the chamber for the new Congress. Pelosi's election comes as the partial U.S. government shutdown enters a 13th day. Protests continue in the southern Indian state of Kerala as anger mounts over two women defying a centuries-long ban to enter Hindu temple, with pressure mounting from conservative groups. And in an historic moment for human space exploration, China successfully lands a robotic spacecraft on the far side of the moon. Hello and welcome. You're tuned in to France 24. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Biahi with the main world headlines. We begin in the US, where California Democrat Nancy Pelosi has been elected as Speaker of the House of Representatives. Now, the decision means Pelosi now holds Washington's third most powerful role for a second time. The last time she held it was in 2007. Well, Pelosi all but ensured her election by agreeing to limit her tenure to no more than 4 years in the chamber's top spot. Speaking earlier, she said she fully expects work in the chamber to prove challenging. Have a listen.
We have no illusions that our work will be easy and that all of us in this chamber will always agree. But let each of us pledge that when we disagree, we respect each other and we respect the truth. We will debate and advance good ideas no matter where they come from. And in that spirit, Democrats will be offering the Senate Republican appropriations legislation to reopen government later today. We will do so to meet the needs of the American people, to protect our borders, and to respect our workers.
Well, as Democrats took control of the House of Representatives for the first time in 8 years, the US entered a new phase of women changing the face of Congress. Well, among those taking oath today were the first black woman elected from Massachusetts and Connecticut, the first Hispanic woman elected from Texas, and the first Native American woman. One of the first Muslim women to be elected was Ilhan Omar. She spoke earlier. Have a listen.
We realized that him and I had not returned on that same airport since the day we first landed here as refugees. And so, you know, it's a very really overwhelming and emotional time for us. And I don't think, you know, as my dad said, you know, he had high hopes for us about the opportunities we would have when we came to this country, but I don't think he imagined that someday his baby would be going to Congress just 20 years after we arrived here.
What did that moment mean for you, sir, standing here by your daughter?
It was amazing. It was amazing. I like it.
Well, for all those latest events in Washington, let's cross live now to our correspondent, Philip Crowther, who's standing by. I mean, Philip, let's begin with Nancy Pelosi. Shortly after she was elected, she addressed the House. Just talk us through some of the messages she put across today.
Well, there were the kinds of words from Nancy Pelosi that we actually haven't heard from that position in the House of Representatives for the last 2 years. That is where the president tends to hold his State of the Union address. That's from where we're used to hearing from the Speaker of the House of Representatives, which, of course, was Paul Ryan until today. From Nancy Pelosi, a clear message to the president and to Republicans that now Democrats would try and force their agenda through at least a little bit in the House of Representatives, because remember that there is still Republican control of the White House and of the U.S. Senate. But Nancy Pelosi, for example, said that she was going to try to keep the cost of health insurance and of health treatment down. She mentioned that she'd want to defend the rights of LGBTQ people in the United States. Those are the kinds of words we're not used to hearing from those in the highest positions in the land for the last 2 years. And also from Nancy Pelosi, a promise to treat climate change a little more seriously, because there will be a select committee in the House of Representatives that will be created, which will have as its goal to tackle climate change. Of course, that's also something that this administration has not done for the last 2 years. This was a reminder for the president and for Republicans that there's something new that is now happening here in Washington, something that they were not used to for the last 2 years. For the president, this will be the first time that he will have to deal with divided government. Up until today, Republicans had control of the White House, of the House of Representatives, and of the U.S. Senate. Now, 1/3 of those is in Democratic control. And as you heard there just now from the new Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, well, Democrats will be bringing up a bill to bring the government up and running again, to end this government shutdown. That will be voted on later today, but of course that won't become law straight away because the U.S. Senate and the White House oppose it.
I mean, in addition to Nancy Pelosi's election today, there were many new faces in Congress, more women of different ethnicities, plus some quite different professional backgrounds. Philip, how far is all that going to go when it comes to shifting the balance of power in Washington?
Well, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter where the members of the House of Representatives come from, because the numbers matter at the end of the day. And there is a pretty handsome advantage there, really, for Democrats in the House of Representatives. They gained a lot of seats in those midterm elections in November, and they will be able to pass quite a lot of bills through the House of Representatives. Now, what they will then be faced with, though, on the other side of the U.S. Congress, is a Senate that is still in Republican control, and in fact a Senate that was able to gather Republican seats during the midterm elections in November. So a bit of a win there in a sense for Republicans, and that has led us to this era of divided government, at least for the next 2 years. What Democrats will be able to point to, though, is that this is a very diverse group of Democrats. It's the biggest amount of women that will be serving in the House of Representatives in all of American history, and that has been made possible by those many Democrats who were elected in November. As you said, this is a racially diverse group in the House of Representatives on the Democratic side, and very much stands in contrast to what we will continue seeing on the Republican side. It's a party that is largely male, that is largely white, and many of those elderly white male members have not changed over the last 2 years. So there's a very clear contrast there between one side of the aisle and the other.
OK, Philip Crowther keeping us up to date from Washington. Thank you. In other world news, Saudi Arabia's Attorney General is seeking the death penalty for 5 of 11 defendants charged with the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The first session of the high-profile trial began in Riyadh earlier this Thursday, though the names of the defendants have yet to be officially released. Khashoggi, a contributor to the Washington Post, was murdered in Istanbul last October in what Riyadh called a rogue operation. The murder has since sparked one of Saudi Arabia's worst diplomatic crises. There was continued unrest in Sudan as demonstrators attempted to deliver an anti-government petition to the local headquarters of President Omar al-Bashir's ruling party in Port Sudan. Security forces fired tear gas to disperse some 200 protesters before they actually reached the building. Soaring inflation has seen many protesters call for President al-Bashir to step down. In a speech to the government earlier, though, Bashir said he was considering handing out pay rises starting this month, but didn't say how much salaries would increase.
In Port Sudan, on the Red Sea, demonstrators on Thursday once again took to the streets. Protests in the country began on the 19th of December and were initially against price increases. But now more and more the slogans are calling for al-Bashir, who's been in power for 29 years, to step down. Early on Thursday, he promised wage increases but did not give details. He also blamed past US economic sanctions and the international community for the country's economic woes.
We are a country that was under an economic blockade for 21 years, and we are on the list of nations who support terrorists. Yet, there has not been one single incident that a Sudanese person has been accused of.
More than a dozen people have been killed since the beginning of the movement. Sudan's largest opposition parties have called for nationwide protests on Friday. Earlier this week, they said the only solution was for the 75-year-old president to go.
The economic crisis is basically a political crisis, and its solution is a political one. Therefore, a new regime must be created.
The authorities have blocked access to social media platforms and declared emergency laws and a nighttime curfew in some cities. Al-Bashir was president in 2011 when South Sudan seceded, a move that hit the economy badly. As a result, Sudan lost 3/4 of its oil production. A year earlier, al-Bashir had been indicted by the International Criminal Court for genocide in Sudan's western region of Darfur. The opposition hopes he will step down before the 30th anniversary of his time in power in June this year.
In India's southern state of Kerala, protests sparked by two women defying a centuries-long ban to enter a Hindu temple have continued. Conservative groups, angered by the move, paralysed the state, causing schools, businesses and shops to close. Bus services were also halted and taxis stopped taking passengers. Last September, India's Supreme Court ordered the lifting of a ban on women of menstruating age entering the Sabarimala Hill Temple. France 24's Brian Quinn has details.
A state of chaos. A second straight day of violent demonstrations rocked the state of Kerala in India Thursday as conservative Hindu hardliners protested a recent Supreme Court decision overturning a ban on women in the holy Sabarimala temple. Most shops closed as temple leaders have called for a statewide shutdown. Schools cancelled, public transport suspended as running clashes between police and rioters filled the streets. Kerala's left-wing state government blamed the country's ruling Hindu nationalist BJP party for the violence.
We are not going to meet in the street the violence of BJP. The police will take care of it. Police made it clear that anybody forcing the shops to be closed or obstructing traffic and so on would be arrested.
Fundamentalist rage exploded Wednesday after video emerged showing two women secretly entering the Sabarimala temple under police guard to pray. For centuries, the temple has been off limits to women of menstruating age or 10 to 50 years old. In 1974, that rule was enshrined in law. Despite September's Supreme Court ruling overturning the law, thousands of Hindu devotees, both male and female, had for weeks managed to prevent any women under 50 from accessing the site. On Tuesday, the local government organized a huge human chain called the Woman's Wall to demand equal access to the temple.
We don't want to walk back. We want to walk ahead. And we want gender equality and gender justice.
One man died Wednesday after being hit in the head with a rock. Local media say 4 people have been stabbed in the unrest, with over 100 injured, including 38 police officers. Critics of Prime Minister Narendra Modi accuse him and his BJP of using the issue to stir up his Hindu base ahead of general elections scheduled for the spring.
Next, South Korea's spy agency says North Korea's top diplomat in Italy has gone into hiding, sparking unconfirmed reports that a senior North Korean official has defected. The information was released as South Korea's spy agency briefed lawmakers in Seoul earlier on Thursday. A high-profile defection by one of North Korea's elite would prove embarrassing for leader Kim Jong-un as he strives for diplomacy with both Seoul and Washington. Next, an historic moment for human space exploration. China has successfully landed a robotic spacecraft on the far side of the moon. Well, part of the Chang'e 4's mission will include astronomical observation and analysing the moon's terrain, which is thought to be rougher and more cratered than the near side. France 24's Yenna Lee has details.
At 10:26 local time, touchdown on the side of the moon humans have yet to examine. Shortly after, scientists at Beijing Aerospace Command and Control Center received this photo, sent directly from the far side of the Earth's satellite, a first in space exploration.
The whole process was as expected, the result was pretty precise, and the landing was very stable. The current location is our most ideal landing place. In other words, we're right on target.
Scientists hope to discover more about the moon's history and unveil the secrets of our solar system. China's lunar probe, Chang'e 4, is carrying 2 cameras and equipment for biology experiments. Also on board is a major test to study radio astronomy. As the moon's far or dark side faces away from the Earth and its frequencies, it's an ideal place to study radio signals coming from deep space with little interference. For China's space industry, the December launch and January landing is a technical and symbolic feat. After the Soviet Union and the US, it was the third country to send a manned mission to space. Ever since, Beijing is vying to overtake American dominance in the arena. By 2022, the country hopes to have its own fully operational space station after the US banned China from joining the ISS. In the next decade, Beijing also plans to send a probe to Mars.
Stay tuned for more news coming up here shortly on France 24.